want to know which planet was causing your suffering? How about Earth?
Hey everyone, Brownflakes here, back with a new Shadowverse 2 video. Today's video is going to be me reviewing the first game between Maxibon and Flying Goatee in the Shadowverse Open qualifiers. I'll be honest, these games were not that interesting. There's only two games I thought were really cool, and they're both by Maxibon playing Forest. I mean, as a Carbuncle, as a Forest fan, obviously I'm rooting for the Forest players. But the other Forest player was not very, what's the word, inspiring. So I'll talk about that as the game goes on, just so I can save some time. But let's go ahead and start with the mulligan. Maxibon, obviously playing Forest, really good Forest player, by the way. Maxibon is a really famous Hearthstone player, like Hearthstone Pro, and he's been dipping his toes into Shadowverse 2. And he's been playing a lot of Rune and Forest, and I really enjoy watching his Forest streams just because not only does he have a different-ish perspective from playing a lot of Hearthstone, he's also still smart enough to know the correct lines for the most part. And obviously, like, people can still misplay. Like, obviously on stream, you misplay because you're trying to entertain chat. So the fact that he's like verbalizing his thoughts makes it really good to like understand why this misplay might have happened, because maybe it's like a moment of distraction, or just like they were totally focused on different lines, so therefore they didn't see actual plays. So anyways, really educational streamer. I recommend them. They're gonna mulligan out Mei and Lily. You mainly keep Mei in aggro matchups. So if you're getting something like Abyss, Sword, things with more tempo, like maybe I think just Abyss and Sword right now that would have early minions for you to clear with Mei. I think you might be able to clear or keep it with Portal, because Portal also likes playing early minions, but it's a bit less consistent because they have a lot of non-minion 2-drops. But yeah, Mei is for those minions, or is for those boards where they would like to hit you early to get you lower early. But since Rune is not that matchup, you don't need it. And then since you already have a Glade, you don't need a Lily in hand, because Lily, if you have Lily and like 2 Fairy Convocations, that's not really a good mulligan. But if you're really scared of having bad draw, then you could keep that hand. But I think against Rune, your most important 2 cards to look for in your mulligan is a Glade and a Godwood Staff. And Fairy Convocation is just good for early pressure, because you can cast, you're going first as Maxibon, you can see Danger that he's going first. So you can play Fairy Convocation into 2 fairies for really good, strong early tempo to punish your opponent for not getting lucky with certain cards early on. Or if you draw Cairn, you can play both of the fairies for Cairn turns, which is a lot lower tempo, and we'll see how he plays it out. So he gets Cairn, he gets Carbuncle. This makes the turn 2 really interesting, just because you do have to make the decision between whether or not you want to play the 2 fairies for tempo or the Carbuncle for tempo, because if you play the Carbuncle, Carbuncle is immediately cleared by a Wind Blast. But if you play the 2 fairies, then the Rune player has to have a 2-drop, but they still take a bit of damage early on, which means that they have to play or have to have stuff like Norman. They have to have stuff like Stage Light Teachings in hand to heal up the pressure. So even though you lose the value on Cairn early on, you, as a Force player, you still have many more ways of generating. Like, you can use drawing God with Stop, obviously a huge boon, but you could have played like 2 pings and then play Carbuncle into Fairy, and you could have done that to fix a turn 3. Like, that's the reason why you play Carbuncle second, is because you want to see if there's Wind Blast, or bait out the Wind Blast first to see if the Rune player wants to mitigate that pressure. And already Maxibon has a really good hand, but this hand isn't good enough quite yet to do both survival and to OTK your opponent, because you do have to have a lot of 0 costs to properly kill a Rune player, especially since they have stuff like Norman and Kuon that can really absorb cards as you need to burn them to kill those cards. And having a Glade is obviously good enough to just like clear the other things. So already here, we see Maxibon being really rewarded for drawing early pressure. Flying Goatee had to burn a Sage Light Teachings just to play the sigils for the upcoming Norman turn in a while. And that means that Maxibon is kind of in a good spot, because of the fact that that means Norman can spawn golems. And that's the value of playing early tempos, that you don't have to, the Norman card, obviously we can see the other hand because of the state of like the spectator view, but a lot of times with Rune, your really hard games are the games where you have to deal with multiple barrier golems against the Rune player. So the Rune player now has to make the decision between healing or summoning golems. If they summon 2 golems, then that's a lot better for tempo, but staying at 16 HP means that they have to draw another Norman, or they have to draw another State Like Teachings to heal out of your lethal range. And every time you're down, like every 2 HP or lower by as a Rune or as a Force opponent, that means that the Force player needs 1 less 0 cost to OTK you by the turn. So, for example, if you have 4 0 costs, you can kill somebody on turn 8. if you have 3 0 costs, you can kill them on turn 9, and you will always need 2 0 costs at least to kill someone on turn 10, outside of extraordinary circumstances like having 2 Karens on board. Like that will adjust your OTK combo by 1 turn depending on if you're doing double Roach or triple Roach. And for example, triple Roach will allow you to kill 1 turn earlier depending on how many 0 costing cards play thresholds you have. So there's a lot of math going on there, but essentially you play these minions to both check your rune opponent to see if they have the proper early game to mitigate the damage, and then check them on whether or not they draw the multiple Kuon or multiple Normans and multiple Sage Lights to stay alive. So that's why playing the early aggression is really good. You're technically a little bit punished for the Karen 0 costs, and we see that Maxi Bond's going to go ahead and use the fairy for Guardians of Litter draw 2, which is pretty good. And the hand went from being a really good start to being kind of awkward because we have a Bale, but not many fairy generators, and we have 2 Goblet Staffs, which would be really good for setting up triple Roach, but we have to play it somehow and hope the opponent has a dead turn. So this next turn is always going to be Glade into Evo, and then deal 1 more damage if the rune player is greedy with their Evo and doesn't want to kill the 1/1, which is pretty common because using an Evo as rune to kill a singular 1/1 can really hurt you later on the line, because you want to use the Evos for stuff like Norman, and you want your super Evos for stuff like Kuon, so you can get the OTK going on. And then we see that Flying Goatee is punished, and more realistically, Maxi Bond is rewarded for playing the 2 fairies, because first of all, we see that Maxi Bond hasn't drawn a second Carbuncle, but we also see that because of the way that Angrea works, the 5/5 can only clear 1 fairy. So much like the way that Stormblast counterplay worked, Flying Goatee has taken 1 extra damage basically over the last 3 turns, because instead of playing the 2/2, which would have done also 2 damage per turn, Maxi Bond gets the 1/1 alive. So this is 15 HP. And again, this makes it a lot harder mental pressure wise on the rune player, because they now have to decide whether or not Norman has to be used for healing or if they're going to commit to the golems just to have a better pressure. But because the Roach player already has a Goblet Staff and a Karen on board, Flying Goatee knows that Maxi Bond doesn't have a 0 cost, so the OTK isn't quite there. But that doesn't matter, because if Maxi Bond's already dropped him down to 15 HP, which means that he doesn't need as many 0 costs. And because he's at an odd amount of HP, certain breakpoints and thresholds with Carbuncle and Double Roach means that odd HP values are even lower on an OTK countdown than even HP values, which is like some math that's really odd. If I ever, or when I do produce that like Roach lethal calculation thing, then it'd be more apparent there. But basically, Flying Goatee has the Kent Norman. They do have another Angrea, but Angrea is also a little bit ugly, especially since Flying Goatee chose to play, I think they played Looking Smart at the start. You could argue that maybe Angrea is the easiest turn to play just to get rid of the Glade, but then you're going to have a 6/6. The 1/1 is cleared by the ping, and then the 5/5 is cleared by the minion. But I think the reason why Flying Goatee is not going for Angrea is purely because of the fact that he doesn't have a decline left, or decline in hand. And because there's no decline in hand, I'm not a rune player, so I'm just theorizing. Like, no decline in hand means that Angrea's value is way worse, because you want the Angrea to have the climb. And so since you expect you can clear anyways with the cards you have, you'd rather go for the worst spell boost option, or like the equivalent spell boost but more hand draining option, because you want to have some cards, or you want to burn the cards you can as a rune player because you have so much draw in your deck. And so this allows Maxi Bond to get a really, really good turn to drop the second Godwood Staff, and also burn the Lily and the May for a bit more pressure, but mostly just for the 2 draws. So that's a really good top deck from Maxi Bond, because remember that the May, I think the May was actually in hand from the turn before. Like, that was just the top deck. So you would have had to maybe play the Ambush from Above, but it's really no difference between Ambush from Above and May for here. It's just 1 extra body that may or may not matter depending on what the rune player has. So here, again, we can see the reward that Maxi Bond gets from playing the 2 fairies early on. The Norman has to choose between keeping 2 barrier minions or just going for a 1 heal, 1 barrier minion. And we also might just see no healing, just because Gilneas can heal you to 5 and then let you play the double golem later on to prevent the Roach turn from being better. So we do see the Gilneas just save the double golem barrier while still also healing, which is again a benefit for Gilneas being released for every other class. And now Maxi Bond has a really full hand, has a lot of draw, so you have to decide how you're going to navigate your hand. Like, is your hand good enough to just burn a bunch of cards? And the answer is actually yes. You have Bug Alert, you have Fairy Fencer, so you can play Fairy Fencer, Fairy, Bug Alert, Cairn, and get a 0 cost. And that will also help you get your Bale down draws as well, or down mana as well. So if you burn everything, you'll have 2 0 costs in hand, and 2 0 costs means that on turn 9, you'll be able to kill. So right now, the easiest plan to have is a turn 9 plan. So you can just think, okay, I just need to get to turn 9. Turn 9, I'm guaranteed to kill because I'll have both Bale, and I have Bale and Carbuncle, and my opponent won't be able to get the coin ward Shikigami because of the fact that I'm going first on 9, and they can't coin out the Noble Shikigami until the next turn. So you're really just all inning on the idea that you want to go for a turn 9 kill. So instead, actually, Maxi goes for even more aggression, just because I think just because you can bounce it back. So you can see here that you actually don't do what I mentioned because it's better draw. And I guess it is really risky to go for a turn 9 kill, and he draws the Roach anyways. So the line here that I was talking about, we can think about why this line is actually better, because I remember watching this game, but I think I must have missed a turn when I was watching because of the fact that I didn't notice his triple Roach. The reason why this turn is actually better than my turn is because when the turn I'm suggesting, where you play Lambent Cairn and you draw a 0 cost and a Fairy, what ends up happening is that you burn 3 cards overall, and then you're really, really all in on the idea of going triple Roach on turn 9. The reason why this line is actually better overall is because you force your opponent to make a play on this upcoming turn, because this 6-4, so your opponent will be at 13. The only thing that even possibly saves you is going to be double Norman. And the issue with double Norman here is that you're going to be leaving a 1-1 on board, so you'll heal to 20, but you'll leave a 1-1 on board, which means that your opponent still has some ping damage. So you can still get the scratch damage in as the Roach player and begin making sure your opponent can stay alive. But mainly it's the fact that you remove the pressure from double Golem, because what happens with the Roach versus Rune matchup is that the Rune player's main win condition is that they get a bunch of Norman minions, Kuon minions, and Graham minions out, and just tempo you out of the game, because you have to play so many Evos to respond to multiple Angreas, multiple Kuons, multiple Normans, and then you run out of Evos to actually win the game because you had to fight the board and not die to the board. But if you're playing a game, like if you're able to stop the Angreas from being a problem, stop the Normans from being a problem, then what ends up happening is that now the Rune player is super, super reliant on you being unlucky and not drawing your Roaches and your Godwoods and your 0 costs. So since Maxibon knows that he has all the Roaches and all the tools needed for a one-shot, this puts the Rune player in a really awkward position, because they can no longer race you down, and their only gameplay now is to just wait and see if they lose the game. And so this is why it's like a really interesting mind game, because yes, Roach is pretty favored, just because what happens with a lot of times with Roach is that if you draw the combo, the Rune player isn't really in a position to fight back unless they have really good tempo. But the way that Maxibon piloted the game was that he essentially forced Flying Goatee into playing on the back seat, and that comes through playing aggressive plays like Convocation into the immediate double Fairy. That comes through plays like playing the immediate Roach with a Super Evo on the previous turn, which I would have missed. Like I could have lost this game because the way I played would have allowed this Norman to set up double Barrier Golem. And if you look at Maxibon's hand from last turn, there wasn't really a good anti-double Golem hand at all. Like I would have had one Fairy and a Lily. One Fairy and a Lily is not enough to kill everything on the board, or it barely is, but then there'd be a Norman swinging at my face. So with the way I played, if Flying Goatee had double Norman, I would have lost, because what happens is that I would lose to the minions being put in my face, and then I would die. Like the Norman would swing my face for 7, and then the second Norman drop, and I wouldn't have a way to clear without burning Bale, which means that my OTK setup is worse because the OTK I was setting up for doesn't work as well. So Maxibon, recognizing that that was really the only way to lose, by letting Normans come down and just full heal for free, preventing the minions from being dropped, preventing the double Norman play, which we know wasn't really in the it wasn't possible because of the fact that I mean, we can see here that Flying Goatee didn't have second Norman anyways, so it wasn't a worry, but it's a sign of a good player to show that that was a line that they were contemplating because they knew it could have been a problem. And so the next turn is going to be pretty straightforward. There are 2 0 costs, 2 Karens, and 3 Roaches. So this is an OTK. There's only there are 2 0 costs. It's not turn 10. I know I said earlier that you need turn 10 to kill. I think there actually is a hand space problem or board space problem with this, so you might have to go to turn 10. So we'll see. I forget if Maxibon actually went for the kill, but I'm pretty sure there's a kill here. Yeah, there's a kill. So you have to remember that sometimes there is a board space problem. There's no board space problem here just because of the way the game plays, but with 2 Karens, you mentioned, I remember I mentioned earlier that with 2 Karens, you move up and down on the 0 cost timer. So you see here, with 2 Karens, you can play double Roach, and since you have 2 Karens, double Roach with only 1 Karen is 19 damage, but with 2 Karens and 2 0 costs, it's exactly 20. So we'll see exactly 20 come out. The Carbuncle swings, and +2 from Karen is at 19 perfectly. So the top deck was the reason why Maxibon ended up winning there. I do think there should have been a way to win without. Let me check that actually. I'm kind of curious. I think Triple Roach also wins. So let me just distract myself with this. This is why I have this trim tool popping up. So let's just go ahead, take a screenshot of this. And the last thing we'll do on this video is just go through the potential for lethal here. So this is a terrible photo. Is there a way to get the... Oh, it's because of me. I didn't get the bottom part of everything down. So let me grab this properly. I'll just zoom down. Okay, so here we are. So is there enough damage for triple lethal for triple Roach? So with triple Roach, you're gonna be playing this. You're gonna be playing Deepwood. You're gonna be playing Bale. And so what ends up happening is that if you play Carbuncle and Cairn, you drop down to 5 mana, right? So the reason why okay, I see why. You actually cannot play the triple Roach lethal because you don't have a 1 cost. So here you need to have a fairy in hand still to play the triple Carbuncle lethal, which is why Maxibon didn't end up doing that here. I guess since you have 3 Roaches in hand, you can modify this a little bit. So how would you have played? No, you still can't because you still need a 1 cost. So yeah. Let's pretend that you have a fairy. Let's just pretend that you have a May here instead, right? So just show my example of triple Roach having a little different of OTKs. So if you have, let's just pretend there's a May for just for the sake of showing off triple Roach. If this is a May, what you do is you play May, and then you go to 8 mana, and you play Carbuncle, which takes you to 7 mana. And so, or rather, you play Carbuncle, which takes you 6 mana. So at 6 mana, with Super Evil Carbuncle, that means you still have 9 mana left for Triple Roach, right? So with May, Bale, Carbuncle, that's 3, or that's 4 because you have a Deepwood here. So then the Triple Roach would deal 5, 6, 7. 5, 6, 7 is 18. And then 18 plus the Cairn that we know exists, and then plus the Carbuncle Super Evo is 20. So again, this is just really important to know because you might be missing a lot of games that you can win as Carbuncle Roach if you miss the fact that you have Triple Roach. So obviously Triple Roach is a bit more conditional. Triple Roach requires you to have 2 Godwoods, or requires you to have 2 Roaches in hand, plus a Godwood, or obviously 3 Roaches in hand. And also requires you to have a 1 cost if you are below 10 mana. But it's really important to remember that just because, again, there are a lot of lethal lines that you can plan for with Triple Roach, which is why I was talking about so much in the previous turn. But against again, like with Runecraft, you have to remember what exactly the Runecraft player can do to prevent you from getting your successful Triple Roach turn. Because again, with my line, if I played the way I played, that means that Flying Goatee would have been allowed to play Norman, which means that there's going to be barriered minions on board with a Norman. And then what happens with that is I can kill the first barrier minions nice and easily. But what happens with the second Norman that pops up? I would have burned my fairies. I would have burned my fairies, and I have a Bale and a Carbuncle, but Bale Carbuncle can only kill 1 barrier minion, and so the second barrier minion would have prevented me from winning. So the idea with Maxibon's play was that you force them to choose between healing and minions, and they make a misplay. You force more decisions on your opponent. The more decisions your opponent has to make, the more likely they are to mess up. So yeah, this is just a I guess like a deep dive analysis of how Maxibon won this game. I think again, the Shadowverse openers or qualifiers were very disappointing. I'll put this at the end here. I originally had this at the beginning of the video, but I decided that if you're watching until the end, you might actually care a bit more about the drama that happened. But I don't think the qualifiers are very good. I think the qualifiers are just straight up a joke. I think skill players will make it through. Like Maxibon is very skilled, but I do not. I guess this could come up as flame, but I do not believe that a lot of the players that came up for this opening qualifiers were our best players. And I guess just as proof of that, we can go through the game before this. This game is really disheartening because there's only two ways to reconcile what happened in this game. The first is that this guy is really bad, and the second is that he was just really BM. And there's really no excuse for either if you're going to be somebody that represents the Western scene in Singapore for the Grand Open Finals. But you can see here where the problem is. So on this turn, I think the issue is that, so what I heard is that the Rune player soft conceded this turn because they decided that there's no way they can win. If you look, they have no draw. Declimb is really low, and I mean the other guy hasn't. This is like a twofold problem. Like the Rune player supposedly soft conceded at this point because they think they can't win, which is fair. They have no draw. Declimb's really high up, but you still have Burgent. You can play Burgent. You can Evo Burgent. You can clear Zudia, and then you're on a clock, and you never know if you can get the funny Norman OTK because you're gonna have 9 mana next turn. So maybe you can play. So you pay Burgent, you get your 2 boost next turn, and then you're on a 2-turn timer to get a Norman and a Declimb, and you never know if you might get the Norman Declimb. But I guess for some reason the Rune player decides to just concede. So this is the first problem. The Rune player gives up. They either give up or they don't know what a Zudia does. So this is This is like the people that went better than 8-2 in the open group, which means I guess they're either lucky or they're skilled. But because of the fact that open groups is just purely a bunch of best of ones, it's impossible to know. Like I don't even know why this decline happened, because this is a Zudia Roach. The Zudia player just played Annihilating Onslaught, so there's nothing preventing you from just playing Dimension Climb next turn. So this Dimension Climb is just like desperation attempt to close the game out faster. But as a Rune player, you should know that one of your main win cons is like Kuon Declimb shenanigans. So again, if you play Burgent, that's a -2. You play Summon Armin, it's -3, so your Dimension Climb is at 6. So if you manage to draw like Foresight or any, like you manage to draw Foresight, you manage to draw Angrea. Like I don't really know what the Rune player played earlier, but like if you have multiple Foresights, you have Looking Smart. Like there are ways to get your Declimb down to nearly 0, or even just get 0 as you draw your Kuon. So like you could on turn 10, like you have a bit of time until the Annihilating Onslaught is procced, right? Annihilating Onslaught, the earliest you can play it is when it's at 3 mana. So this next turn you're okay. Next turn it gets down to 4, and then you have another turn. So at 10 mana max, you still have one more turn because it gets roots down to 4, or roots down to 3 at the end of their turn. So you actually have 3 more turns to play the game. But instead, you soft concede and you roulette Dimension Climb for really no reason. Like I don't know why this needs to be necessary, because you had to kill with Burgent anyways, and then you draw Burgent. You draw both your Kuons. So why are you not just killing? Like I just don't understand why the Zudia is left alive. Like that's the first massive misplay. Like we have a top 8. This is top 8, right? Yeah, I think this is top. No, this is top 4. One of the top 4 players just doesn't kill. Like they still have time to kill it. Like they still have ways to kill it. Like this is a guy that made it through 10 rounds. Like I get that Azudia Rose or Forest was not that popular probably in open group, but is this not just like so weird? And then the worst part is that they let him live, they soft concede, and then this guy who's playing the deck doesn't even take the kill, doesn't even take the win. And like on one hand, I guess from the rune player side, you can pretend that they just gave up, but why is the Force Azudia player also not winning here? Like why? And then again, there's two ways to see this. Like there's one way where you just see it as a gross misplay, but there's proof online where this guy, like I think his Discord messages got leaked, and he said like, "Oh, I'm just trying to make Rune feel terrible. Like I wanted Rune to feel like a bad, like make sure they lost all hope. Blah blah. Like it's either insane BM or it's the bad player, and neither are good looks. So yeah, I'll probably if this end part gets any traction, I'll probably make a video about my full thoughts on this thing. But it's just I don't know why like this like because the winnings for this is not a small amount. Like $1,500 is not a small amount of money for like a one like for what like 10 hours over 2 days. Like that's a lot of money for the amount of effort you put in, and we have people just like playing like this and winning, or having horrific manners like this and being allowed to go through. I don't know. It just feels like horrific taste. But yeah, that's gonna be the video. Unfortunately, this guy that missed the lethal is the winner of this qualifiers, which is even more disgusting. But yeah, that's gonna be all for me. Bye, guys.